Being a marketer's no sweat. You just have to manage dozens of channels, launch hundreds of campaigns, score thousands of leads, and okay, fine, it's a lot of sweat. Unless you have HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools to help you do all that and more. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
Rob Everett, now an analyst for the Miami Dolphins, joined me to co-host a series in which we focused on technology in football. In this episode, we focus on enhancing game strategy and discussing key moments in a game that determine success. We explore the need for structured processes and effective communication to capitalize on player strengths and avoid missed opportunities in games. Rob shares his methodologies and some simple tools he uses, as well as some advanced analytics for real-time decision-making. We recorded this episode when Coach Everett was with the Alliance of American Football Spring League. When I met Rob, he was a high school defensive coordinator. He then became the defensive coordinator at Bridgewater College from 2016 to 2018, and following his stint in the AAF, joined the University of North Carolina staff as the senior analyst under offensive coordinator Phil Longo, and then moved with Longo to Wisconsin. He's in his first season as an analyst for the Miami Dolphins. Coach Everett's path to the NFL was created with his expertise with technology and analytics. With the Dolphins, he utilizes modern football technology in practice. We'll get Coach Everett back on the podcast in the future to talk about that and some other things that he's doing now as an analyst. Before we get into our conversation on in-game analytics, let's take a listen to what Trevor Hudson, head coach at American Canyon High School and one of our National Coach of the Week honorees, has to say about our partner, Modern Football Technology.
Good morning. My name is Coach Trevor Hudson. I'm the head football coach at American Canyon High School, and I want to take the time to talk to you real briefly about modern football technology and how it's helping our program and helping us stay a step ahead of our competition. The in-game analytics is easy to use. It's something that anybody can break down, and it tells you what to run, when to run it, and how effective it is to run said plays. This is a program that I would highly recommend to anybody. Unless you play me, then I don't want you using it because I don't need you knowing what I know. On the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball, modern football technology has been a great help to help the Wolves get to an 8-0 record and hopefully continue to get greater. You're not using it, you're holding your program back. Check it out now.
If you're in the playoffs right now or getting ready for that playoff push, you can still adopt modern football technology as one of your in-game tools. They're out-of-the-box ready and have a simple process, and the team does a great job of onboarding you so that you get the most out of it immediately. If your season's done, it's a great tool to look back on the season and get some data to help you form some decisions about what you need to do in the future. I highly recommend incorporating this in your game planning workflow and in-game process in 2025. The link to Modern Football Technology is in the show notes. And joining me on the podcast is our co-host of this series, Rob Everett. Rob, great to be talking ball with you here. Another week into the season and another opportunity to help coaches find some things that'll get them the winning edge this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Another great Tuesday. Hopefully the game plan is getting tweaked, getting ready to be locked tomorrow, and get after it this week.
So, Rob, today's topic, we're going to approach kind of from both an offensive and defensive side of things and some experiences you and I have. And to set this up, I want to bring up, an example of, I guess, how things maybe not done correctly can go wrong. And I remember I was out, recruiting on a Friday night, watching a game, standing down on the sidelines, and there was a player on one of the teams who was going to Ohio State, currently is still there. And I'm watching this kid and, I'm wondering, wow, it'd be great to see this kid in person. I wonder what he could really do. He doesn't look that big, but let's see. And sure enough, first play from scrimmage, they run like a counter sweep and he's gone. And I'm like, okay, these guys have an advantage this game and they keep getting this kid the ball. Well, the next series, he lines up out in the slot, and they had 3 incomplete passes to him. The next series, they ran a few different plays, and what was surprising to me is that play that went for a touchdown was never called again. And, I get to thinking about this, and I know there's all kinds of different ways and guys say how they call a game, call it from feel, whatever. But, I think if you don't have some kind of process in place, whether it's the simplest of analytics or something that is highly technical, you could sometimes get lost in your call sheet, sometimes get lost in the game and forget to do the things that are going to make a difference for your team.
Yeah, it's so funny. We try to sometimes make this game a lot more complicated than it needs to be. And, I've never called an offensive game before, but I always thought, hey, I just got a first down on this play, or I just got a touchdown on this play. Let's see what happens when we run it again. And it's fascinating. I think that story that you used, I heard a similar story in this past week from a buddy of mine who had the same thing. And you're right. If you don't have that process, and we talk about a lot of high-tech stuff here, but if you don't even have a low-tech process to keep yourself organized on game day and be able to analyze what is working inside the game plan, some opportunities can get missed. There's no question.
So today we're going to focus on that topic, and we're going to look at and think about that few minutes that you have between series to either crunch some numbers, to take a look at what's been working, to have some important conversations, and communicate efficiently to find what you're going to do the next drive to keep your team on track or to take advantage of what the opponent's doing. So I'll let you kick things off, Rob. You've had some experiences, both high-tech, low-tech. We'll call it high-tech. Things are progressing at a fast rate on the technological side, but experiences both with technology and, with the paper way of doing things. But regardless, you had a system for how you guys were going to look at things between series.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most important thing, and this is hard to do, and I've sat in the press box for a long time, so it's easy for me to say this, but one thing that we talked about as coaches is immediately when the players come off the field, it is so tempting to jump on them about corrections or, even positive things that they did. But we really stressed, when I was a coordinator at the college level and at the high school level, we really stressed when the players come off, they know exactly where to go. Let them go to the bench. Let them sit down. Let them celebrate by themselves. Let them be mad together. If we gave up a touchdown, they don't need a coach reminding them that we gave up a touchdown right there. And then that's from a player standpoint, but then also from a coaching standpoint, you need that time to digest and make sure that we're saying the right things. I've seen this so many times where a coach will say something to a player and then we come back and make an adjustment and what the coach just said isn't applicable. So that's a big thing that I would suggest to coaches is really be cognizant of the time in which you say things right after a series, because I think that time is valuable. Like you said, that those seconds are precious and you need to make sure that everything you say is accurate. So the process that we did originally, before we really started getting into the tech version of it, we used a low-tech version of just the generic hit chart defensively. And we basically took every situation that was in the call sheet and created just a simple tick mark to give us the ability to kind of get a quick snapshot. And I'm pretty good with numbers, so I was able to run some percentages pretty quickly in my head, but just get a quick snapshot to see whether the numbers that you game planned with are matching up with what is showing up on the field. So, you take P and 10, you take all your third down situations. If they're a big motion team, in making those run pass tick marks, whatever went into your game plan, that's what you need to check for, because that's going to verify whether you're on the right track, if you've game planned off a certain thing, or else this team, like we talked about in the past on the podcast, this team is doing something on purpose to kind of veer you away. So identifying those things in the series in your hit chart that you've game planned off of. And we'll talk more about it, but that paper copy of the hit chart turned into a digital copy using numbers and Excel that would calculate these percentages automatically for you. And so now it was, you had somebody on the sideline typing in the formation, the run, the pass, direction, whatever you were working off of, and those things were automatically populated. And I would bet that there's someone on your staff or someone in your school that, that is familiar with writing those formulas. You'd be surprised how easy that is to create.
Yeah, from the offensive side, again, being at the college level, we never had the opportunity to use technology in in the box, but we certainly had a system for how we were going to get our information together and, dividing things up amongst the staff. We've talked about this before, and having a certain set of eyes on certain things and making sure that that's being communicated. To me, the best way to do that is to either have all those guys up together so they can communicate with each other, but not on the headphones, because you don't want to disrupt the play caller, or on the sidelines together, one way or the other, those guys together so they're getting the data together, whether that's one guy looking at the front in blitz and another guy looking at the coverage, somebody certainly charting the play. So at the end of that, we really quickly, with our code, and our code was very simple. It was the same that we would use to break down games, but, was universally understood by all the coaches, and we used that same language. We had the play with the defense against it, and it was exactly what you said. Like, we knew coming in, and we would have those charts upstairs. Here's what we expect on these certain downs. Here's the amount of pressure we might expect in certain areas of the field, whatever. And we're looking to see, are they holding true to that? Are they doing something else, just like you said? And, one of the biggest tools for me was I wanted anything 4+ highlighted. I wanted those efficient plays to be highlighted for us so that when I looked at that sheet, that those things popped out at me, that I saw, hey, look at this. We're running our one back power 4 yards or better every single time we call it. I better keep calling more power. And that's a very simple thing to see. Then the other thing I would do in looking at this is, for me, it was always about kind of a mini game plan in between every series. So I would think about and talk with the coaches, really quickly about some of the things they feel good about. The offensive line coach certainly would have a ton of input into that. Our guy looking at the coverage, our receivers coach would have the input into some of the things he saw, at least coming open on the field, etc. And then certainly the things I was looking at. We'd put that information together, and basically, I would quickly come up with, all right, here's our game plan, here's our calls for the next series. And so it was, usually putting together, okay, here's a few first down calls, and looking at it situationally. Okay, if we get into 3rd and long, here's what I like. 3rd and medium is what I like. If we have a short yardage, here's what I like. Here's our shot for this next series. So going through, and it would be looking at our call sheet and kind of just writing those down real quick, so I have all those calls right in front of me, and I'm not searching through the call sheet for the next series. Now, as we got into a series, if it started getting longer, then I would go to the call sheet, and usually I'd have kind of 3 fingers on it. I'd have, the index finger on one hand and index and pinky on the other on my situations, knowing that, okay, here's my first down. If we get this, if I'm in 2nd down, we're here. If I get a big game, we're here. If I'm behind schedule, we're here. And I could look down at my sheet and say, okay, here's the situation. I know where we're at. This is my call here. So it's being very organized about it. Not that I always called 100% off of the call sheet. Sometimes, you again, theoretically get that feel, or you get in the zone and you know where to go with things. But, having your information organized, I feel, is so important going into the next series, and being able to communicate that with the players too, that they know, hey, we cross midfield, we're going to take this shot. Or if we get to a certain point on the field, we're going to run this gadget play or trick play or whatever it might be. Again, giving your players a heads up before they go on the field, I think, helps them understand what the plan is and how you're going to attack the defense moving forward.
No, there's some really good points. I really like the talk about high tech, the fingers on the different situations. That's high tech right there, Keith.
Yeah, it is.
But it's also, with all these situations, is understanding as the unit that's on the field, as that drive is unfolding, getting your mindset into the things that most likely will happen. Once that, thinking defensively, once our offense kind of crossed the 50, from a defensive standpoint, you need to start thinking, okay, if we are going to go back on the field, if we have to punt, it's most likely going to be a backed up situation for their offense. So how is that going to adjust our response? The same thing from an offensive standpoint. I would imagine that, if it's 2nd and 8, on the 3-yard line, on the -3, you got to think if they get to third down, hey, this is going to be a plus side start. This might be our shot situation. And so getting everybody understanding how the sides, offense and defense, and with the connection to special teams, how those things play into each other, anticipating the situation so the play call can get comfortable. And then also, the players kind of are aware of the situation. Hey, thinking this, based on where the ball is right now.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too. You mentioned, the other side of things, whether that's special teams or thinking about the defense. One of the biggest things for me before I started calling plays that next series, real quickly, I looked to our defensive coordinators next to me and said, "Hey Jim, what do you need?" And hey, I need a little bit more time. Try to slow these guys down, keep us off the field a little bit. Which will go into the procedures I'm going to use. Are we going to go fast tempo here? Are we going to slow it down a little bit? And we had those situations. I could think of one in particular where he said, "Hey, we were just on the series a long time. Slow it down. See if you can milk the clock a little bit." And all of a sudden we hit a big play for a touchdown. I looked at him and I said, "Sorry." He's like, No, don't worry about it. So, you try to, I think if you're doing good, you're making those notes and you're communicating with the other side as well, and you're understanding, everything that's going on there. Even something simple like knowing from the head coach, do I have 4 downs? We're in a certain area of the field. Do I have 4 downs? Because that's going to affect the way that you call that particular set of plays.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something that, you certainly want to know going into that. But, that's something that you and I have talked about this before. As an offense or a defense, you guys should know where that thing is before even going into the game. This is where our bonus territory starts. That's where you really get a staff that's humming and in sync when those conversations mid-series are reminders because you've gone through that scenario in practice or had that conversation at a table in a staff meeting. That's when you really find your groove. I think, both offensively and defensively, you really start working together that way when you've had those conversations before they actually come into play on game day.
And I think as we look at this, it's always good to have the data. It's always good to the more information, we think sometimes is the better, but the way in which you're able to look at it and the way you can present it to your players. I think if you find a system or you find a way that is simple, that's the best, right? You don't want to get bogged down. You certainly, we talk about our players being able to play fast all the time. And you want to be able to get into a rhythm and call a game a certain way as well. And if you're always hesitating in between and, not sure what to call, I've had those before where that slows down and it just, you could tell it's having an effect on the players too when you can't get into a rhythm as a coach.
Yeah, that's right. And that's true of analysis in between series as well. It's not allowed at the college or professional level, although there are replay, boards in the booth and things like that. But, so many high schools now have TVs on the sideline and sideline replay. That is a huge advantage. There's no question. But if you spend all your time, if you don't have a process of this is how we're going to use this technology, it's like taking a test. You could spend all your time on one question and then, not answer the rest of the 99 questions that are there that need to be there. So the technology and the information is great. And I think this is a common theme of this podcast, Keith, is you need a process and it needs to be repeatable and it needs to be simple so that it enhances your performance and the product that you're putting out there, rather than, like you said, slowing it down.
And I see these things come up, over the course of a season where guys are asking questions about communication and how things work. And certainly you want to work those out beforehand. You want to try to have those clear. I'd say if for whatever reason you've hit some stumbling blocks on the communication, take the headphones out to practice. Put the communication system in place in practice. I've had numerous coaches, offensive coordinators this offseason talk about, their head coach kind of controlling the situations, putting them in different situations and making them think on their feet out on the field. And so, as you get into things, if you feel you want to tune things up, look at that as a practice, maybe not being as highly scripted that here's the practice script and we're going to stick to it, but having as a coach to think on your feet a little bit and communicate with each other and kind of, again, we've always said it, create those mini situations within practice, but don't think they're only for your players. I think it's the opportunity for you as coaches to get better as well. And so if it's hasn't been going well for you this season, or you feel you could get better, or if you feel like, hey, we really need to be sharp on this when we get into the playoffs, take a look at that right now here as you're heading into these final few weeks of the regular season, so that you are peaking, you're on top of your game with what you need to do to have your players understand exactly how you're going to adjust in game.
Yeah, I think that's right because of the nature of this game. Basketball plays 2 or 3 times a week. Soccer plays 2 or 3 times a week. The start and stop of this game, and the fact that you really only get it once a week. The game day environment, recreating that in practice is so key. And you're right, it is so easy nowadays, I would think, to bring out a headset. I was talking to a buddy who coaches in college just the other day, and they just did that to practice their rally situation in the bye week. And they brought the headsets out to go through that. Because I think the biggest thing with the headsets, what that does is it really clears up who's supposed to be saying what and when. The worst thing that any coach can do is be a commentator on the headset. I guess the second worst is being negative on the headset, but commentating the game and being the color man during the game is, as a play caller, it is brutal. So there's some good articles on what Josh McDaniels has done in New England on the way that he structures in between a play, but even in between a series, having conversations. You are responsible for this, and then mute your mic. You are responsible for saying this, and mute your mic. Don't get into opinions. Don't get into, oh, for me or oh, for us. Focus on solution-oriented things and be concise with it. And like you said, that comes from practice. And so, something that we did when I was a coordinator, both in college and in high school, we would have those practice in between drive situations where I sat in the press box, so I didn't go down on the field, and we would play a play, and then defense would come and sit on the sideline. The second group would go in and run a play, and we would make some sort of adjustment. And the coaches would have a conversation and practice communicating. And then they would go back out and execute it. And we scripted it so that situation would happen. You can't put enough value on recreating the things that you have to do. Because like we said, they just don't happen. It happens once a week, for 10 weeks, sometimes less than that. So that experience, even though we practice a lot, the game experience is few and far between. We've got to create it as much as we can for both the players and the coaches.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite things I've heard on this podcast is that adjustment period. I don't think we think about those kinds of things enough. We have the time. We talk about it all the time, guys, and get into this time of the year, cut back a little bit. Well, maybe it's not necessarily I'm going to take all that time out of practice, but you can slow it down with something like this. Have those adjustment periods maybe on a certain day of the week. You want to save some things physically, but really put the stress on the mental part of the game and, making sure that your guys are sharp there, they're communicating, they're understanding what they're hearing on the sidelines and being able to get back out on the field and execute it. So I love that. And if you didn't share that story, I was going to ask you to talk about that and talk about your adjustment period. So you were right on top of it, Rob. So some great suggestions today, Rob. Again, just some ideas to keep the edge, maybe put you ahead of your opponent a little bit because you're thinking about the details that go into this game.
Yeah, I think this is the time of year where you can, it's getting close to the end, but it shouldn't stop the innovation. It shouldn't stop you, paying attention to the little things. But, this is make it less of the grind and more of the focus on efficiency and communication to put the best product out on the field.
Thank you again for supporting the Coach and Coordinator podcast. As you know, we want to support coaches at all levels by providing insight into the mindset and the skill set of the best coaches. We also want to share the best tools and technology that they use, and you can find those in our 10% toolkit. The link is in the show notes. Follow all we're doing at coachandcoordinator.com and follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.